I see a lot of my viewers grinding through certifications and aiming for just SOC roles, right? And then they wonder why the job market feels brutal and why it feels impossible to learn cyber and break into it. But it's actually way simpler than you think. You don't need to overcomplicate it and learn 10 different things, right? There are only a few simple steps to follow, and you just need a focused path and the right skills, especially in 2026 when a lot of the work is getting automated and half the skills people still tell you to learn are straight out of 2021. So I'm going to break it all down in this video: what's dying and what's replacing it, everything you need to know essentially. And why am I the one to go over this? So, quick context: I work as a senior cybersecurity consultant at a Big Four. I also run one of the biggest cybersecurity communities on the internet that helps beginners break into the field. So, I see things from both angles, right? What the market is actually paying for and what's working for people trying to get in. And most learn cyber content is just not up to date with what the market needs right now, especially with AI coming in and a lot of the roles slowly vanishing. For example, entry level SOC or tier one SOC being one of the obvious ones. But yeah, what I want to start with is what to stop doing first. Okay, so the first mistake I see a lot of people making is they just end up collecting certs. So they go for something like the Security Plus, and after that, they want to go for the next certification. So they go for this Cyber Plus or Blue Team Level 1, for example. And then they see a lot of job roles ask for the CISSP. So they end up going for that after. But what people don't tell them is that this, especially for the CISP, that needs 5 years of experience to even count in the first place. But yeah, people just think that they can cert their way past having no experience. And what a CV stacked with certifications and no hands-on proof reads as is basically saying, oh, I studied a lot, but I built nothing. So all you essentially need is one certification to get past the keyword filter, and the Security Plus does a job for that, right? But if you're going for cert number 4, and what you're usually doing is just avoiding the harder thing, which is producing actual proof that you can do the work. Okay, mistake number 2, and this one's very common as well, and it's trying to become a pen tester as your first job. I get why hacking looks very cool online, but pen testing is a tiny, senior heavy slice of the market. For every one entry-level pen test role, there are dozens of defensive, governance, and cloud roles nobody's fighting for. So people actually end up spending a year chasing the OSCP certification for a job that barely exists at entry level, right? When the same year can be spent on the boring sounding stuff, which would actually get them hired. Okay, let's move on to mistake number 3, and this is going to be really important for helping you get hired, right? And this one is around you staying invisible. So you don't document anything and you've got no presence on LinkedIn. And let me explain to you why this is important, right? Most cybersecurity jobs get filled through referrals, and a lot of them get filled before they're even posted publicly. So what happens is someone on a team says, oh, I know this person, and that person will get shortlisted for that job. And if you're not a name anyone recognizes, you're not even in that conversation in the first place, right? So no matter how good you are, you would never be considered for that job. So your whole task here is to become that name that comes up. You do that by showing your work in public consistently. So post what you're learning on and building on LinkedIn, for example, the projects. Leave a genuinely useful comment on other people's posts so that they start recognizing you. And the other thing you can do, which is super useful, is go to cybersecurity conferences and meetups and have real conversations. And you don't just get the LinkedIn connection, right? You ask them for follow-ups and say if there's any roles that they might be hiring for or their team might be hiring for. What are the things I can do and learn to be able to get considered for that job, things like that. And if you do this for a few months, roles start coming to you instead of the other way around, because you're already on people's radar when something opens up. And in the end, nobody's going to refer a person they've never heard of, right? And finally, we have mistake number 4, and this one's going to be really big for 2026, and it's learning the exact task AI is about to take over. So a huge chunk of traditional entry-level cyber job was grunt work. So what I mean by this is reading through logs, triaging low-level alerts, writing up the same report for the 100th time. That is precisely the work that's going to get automated first, right? And if your whole pitch is, I can manually sift tier 1 alerts, you're training to compete with a tool that is going to do it faster and cheaper. And I still think learning the fundamentals underneath that work is essential, but positioning yourself as the human who does the repetitive work is a shrinking job. So that's the trap I don't want you guys to fall into. So these are the 4 mistakes I don't want you to make in summary. Certs as a substitute for proof, a hacking fantasy job with almost no entry-level roles available, staying invisible instead of building a presence, and training for the manual work that's being automated. Now, the good news is we can fix all 4 mistakes, but before we get onto that, let me give you some inside knowledge on the market. So 3 things changed at once, right? And in terms of beginner advice online, it didn't really catch up. So the first thing is everything moved to the cloud. The attack surface isn't a server room anymore, right? It's AWS, Azure, and hundreds of different SaaS tools. The second thing is regulation exploded. So banks and big firms are now legally on the hook for how they handle security, their third parties, and their outages. That created an enormous demand for people who understand risk and resilience, not just tools. And the third thing is AI just arrived, right? And that reset what entry level even means. The floor got raised, the boring work is going, and the judgment work is now the entry point. So the skills that win in 2026 sit exactly where those 3 trends meet, and I'll go through exactly what they are. Okay, so these are the skills you need to know in 2026. The first one is risk translation. And this is one of the most undervalued skill in all of cyber, and it's the one my whole industry runs on currently, right? So this essentially means, can you take a technical finding and explain it in plain business language, right? For example, why it matters, what it could cost, and what to fix first. That's it. That's the skill that turns a technician into someone a company promotes. AI can find the vulnerability for us, but it's much worse at sitting with for example, a nervous stakeholder and deciding what actually matters for their business. So what I want you guys to think is think in terms of risk, not just tools. Number 2, we have cloud security. So if you learn one technical domain this year, just make it cloud. What you can do is pick one provider like AWS or Azure and get comfortable with identity, permissions, and misconfigurations. That's where the real breaches happen now and where the roles lie. And this skill is, a lot of people find it too advanced. They might think it's too difficult for me as a beginner, right? And it really isn't. You just need to cover the basics properly, and most people never bother doing this, which is exactly why it's going to put you ahead of the crowd. Number 3, we have AI security and AI governance. And this barely existed as a beginner topic 2 years ago, right? And now it's one of the fastest growing areas in the field. It runs at my specific firm where I work as its own pillar. So I'll give you the details from what I essentially know, right? There are 2 sides. So one is securing AI systems. So things like prompt injection and data leakage. The second part is governing AI. So this is around how a company proves it's using AI safely and legally. And companies are kind of scrambling for anyone who understands this, right? And there's not really a talent pool with the right skill set. So being early here is genuinely a head start for you guys. So definitely look into this area of expertise. Okay, at number 4, we have third party and resilience risk. Almost nobody makes beginner content about this, right? Which is why it's going to be an opportunity. When a company gets breached now, it's usually through one of its suppliers. And regulators know this, right? So new rules are forcing firms to prove they can survive a supplier failure or an outage. That's kind of created a steady, well-paid demand for people who understand supply chain risk and operational resilience. And it's not really hyped about online, but it's a very hireable skill in 2026. And number five, we have basic automation. So earlier I said a lot of the manual, repetitive work is getting automated, right? So the move right now is be the person who builds the automation instead of the person it replaces. So in practice, that means learning a bit of Python and learning how to write detection rules. So what a detection rule is, it's just simple logic that says if this suspicious thing happens, flag it automatically so a human doesn't have to watch for it by hand. And you don't really need to be a software engineer for this, right? You just need to be able to take a boring task someone used to do manually and turn it into something that runs on its own. And companies pay a real premium for this, right? Because it saves them time and is the exact opposite of the work that's currently disappearing. And finally, skill number six, and this is a super important skill, right? And it's the one that's going to survive everything. AI is not going to be able to take over this. And this one is more about doing the job well rather than helping you land it. So every technical skill I just listed is worth more if you can explain it to a non-technical person. So picture this moment. There's a serious security incident that just happened and the room is tense. And someone non-technical needs to understand what's happening and decide what to do about it. The person who can calmly turn that technical mess into a clear decision is the one who gets trusted, kept around, and gets promotion. That's a completely different skill from writing, for example, a good detection rule that we talked about in the automation. And it's the one AI is furthest from touching. And I want you guys to take this one seriously, right? Because I know it's not as technical as the others, but it's the one that's going to set you apart. So yeah, that covers all the skills you need for 2026. Let me give you a quick recap, right? Stop stacking certifications as a substitute for proof. Stop chasing a hacking job that barely hires beginners. Stop staying invisible. Stop building a presence. And stop specializing in the exact work that AI is taking over. And instead, what you want to do is build your risk judgment, focus on cloud, get early on AI security, learn the resilience and the third-party side that nobody touches, and learn to automate. And if you want to learn these skills specifically and build real projects around them to actually gain experience, you can work with me directly by joining my cybersecurity group. It's linked in the description. It should be the first link. So yeah, if you're interested in working with me, just give me a message on there, join the group, and then give me a message. And in the comments, let me know which skill you're going to focus on next and if there's any skills that you found kind of surprising. But yeah, thank you for watching. Leave a subscribe if you want more videos like this, and I'll catch you guys very soon.